Welcome back to Hard Labor and Money Splashes,
a podcast about the Rolling Stones.
We're your hosts, Craig and John. We're your hosts, Ferdinand and Marco.
We all know who we are, right? That's like classic Cameo.
We know who we are.
Who are you?
Who are you? Who are you as the listener? And that's a pretty existential question.
So the next song is going to be Tie You Up, The Pain of Love. This is one of my favorite all-time Stone songs.
Not just on this album, but just
of
in
all
general.
Time, period. You know, this is we tell you things like you can't just have the Stones' greatest hits and be satisfied. You know, you'd miss songs like this that are just incredible.
From the jail, no parole, no bail. Hard liver, 50 lashes, heartbreak of money splashes. Hard to survive the pain.
I found a bit with Mick saying that this was sort of to him it was like a old Lowell Fulson song, just maybe brought up to date with a bit of a different flavor, but that's the idea behind it. I couldn't find anything that really matched up to that. For something like She Was Hot, you can go pull up any number of Chuck Berry songs and go, oh, well, that's the obvious. Okay, when he says this is like a Chuck Berry song, you can see that instantly.
Maybe like his song Tramp. There's like maybe another Lowell Fulson that comes to mind. But again, it wouldn't be off of like Lowell Fulson's greatest hits either. This is a weird song. Ronnie's on bass, but you know, he's a full-fledged bass player. He's done it before. I remember that was a thing when Bill quit. Well, maybe they'll just put Ronnie back on bass and they don't need another guitar player.
Right. Or they'll bring Mick Taylor back or something. It definitely, there's a drum beat that's really prominent, especially when it goes into this, it's even past the bridge. It's just this part where Mick's sort of chanting over the drums later on.
It's gonna be time to young. It's gonna be time to young. It's gonna be time to young. It's gonna be time to young.
That was probably my favorite part of the song when I would first listen to this on my, primitive stereo system at the time. That sounded really good in that system. I know a lot of people talk about the kind of dated sound of that era. And this, I think we don't see as much here as we do on Dirty Work with those really big drum sounds.
Right.
But we do see it on this track a little bit in that, but just in that little pocket.
This has got, this was also, again, scandalous at the time. It was considered to be, there was a lot made of these S&M references, and it was some sort of kinky sex song. And when you see the reviews and interviews of the day, this is one thing. There's all this violence on this album and blood and this S&M. When you actually listen to the song, like it's more of the entendre level. Really, I would say this song is about love, and you have to say, like, have all your relationships been smooth? Well, here's a song for you by people who've been there. I think it has a lot to say, and it's tough, and it gets tougher as it goes. It's a strong thing. This would have been one of my single picks, I think.
Really? I wonder if this would have got over it. You see how much resistance there is to this idea of violence in these songs and the pushback. Now, this is even more overtly, it isn't, but it would be construed as such in that era. Would this even, would it be a Street Fighting Man type of thing where, it was the single, but no one would play it? And no one would touch it. Maybe, and Mick has said, like, well, I forget it was Mick or Keith who had said it at the time, like, well, maybe they'll ban it. It always goes well when they ban these songs. We have more success with it.
Now is this, this is right for a cover from someone. Maybe we should cover it.
Yeah.
It should be out there.
I don't know how many, Stones tribute bands have covered this. I don't, there's a lot of, there's some famous bands who've covered Stone songs and things. This definitely, I've never found a cover of this, but.
It's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's great.
But it's terrific. Take our word on that. I think next we're looking at Wanna Hold You, which is the only Keith song on the album. I think it's largely a Keith song. He talked about this in a lot of interviews about him writing this one with just him and Mick, with Mick playing drums. It was influenced, and you can tell this, I think. The influence was like an early Lennon and McCartney.
Well, I think he was saying like this was like a I want to hold your man kind of inspired thing. To me, this sounds like early Expensive Winos, like almost like a foreshadowing. Like this could be happening, and maybe this is Keith's thing. He's like, I want to make this grown up rock and roll, not all this weird 80s music. Who cares about that? Let's do what we do better than anyone else. I think that's the struggle throughout this album. And let's see, Ronnie's on bass again.
Yeah, Ronnie, to me, we'll take a sidetrack, and we could probably do a whole thing just on this, but to me, Ronnie is is the kind of guy. Ronnie can do anything. And I feel like Ronnie can do anything as well as anybody. I would think if there's, how would I say this? I think Bill doesn't get credit for the bass lines the genius of the bass lines he created. He's like a Donald Duck. He's up there with anybody. Well, I mean, if you're going to listen to this, you're going to know we're going to praise Bill Wyman constantly.
He plays lots of other things too. I mean, as far back as Satanic Majesties, he's on keyboards. He's on keys here on a couple songs.
So I think what might be fair to say is Ronnie, or many people, may be able to play Bill's parts. I don't know that they'd be able to come up with Bill's parts.
Wow. Yes.
So it's the same with maybe like a Mick Taylor. I think Ronnie can play all of Mick Taylor's stuff. I don't know that he necessarily would have come up with all those Mick Taylor lines in that fashion, because he's not necessarily that kind of guitar player. But
now the thing we should explain about this album too is a lot of times the Stones aren't necessarily all in the studio together when these songs are being written or performed. So a lot of times it's like, well, Bill's not coming in. Ronnie, pick up that bass. Let's get this song made right now, or let's start writing this.
There's an interview, I think, around the time of this with Bill Wyman where he's calling that out. Like, well, I can't really do overdubs because you need that bass and drum together in the beginning. It's not like a guitar part you can lay over. So in those instances, I'll switch over to synthesizer or a keyboard or something like that. Yeah, I think that's part of why in some instances later we've seen where they're like, well, we'll get they were mad at him when he left. So they were saying, well, we'll get another guy, A couple other things with this. One is, this is the only Keith song on the album.
In retrospect, everyone's saying, oh, Keith didn't like this album. He only had, the one song on it and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know that was, again, startling at the time.
He definitely was a fan of this one because he talked about this a lot, about how this one started with him. I don't know that this was one that they had I mean, I don't think at this point, Keith's probably not thinking too much in terms of singles. I think he's thinking more in terms of albums and songs with longevity. But I guess here's my question, because we keep coming back to this idea of Keith saying he wants to grow this up and make this sound, But this isn't necessarily a defining, when you talk about this one, this is a great song. It's a lot of fun. It definitely has a throwback kind of feel to that early Lennon-McCartney and things like that.
It also, this could have been on Tattoo You.
Yeah, I do agree with you. It could have been on Talk is Cheap. It does kind of bridge the gap between the two worlds there. But I don't think it's necessarily what he had in mind, or maybe he's still trying to define it at that point. Like, what does it mean to grow this up? What does that sound like? Right. I think this is where you get that push and pull between them, where they're saying, you're just doing a retro thing. You're doing a Chuck Berry thing. You're kind of spinning your wheels. This isn't growing it up. This is us. Yeah, we're doing this better than anybody, but it's not necessarily
everything it could be.
Everything it could be. I'm kind of curious about his take on it there. They don't play it live until 97, and then it's one of two. It rotates, I think, as one of Keith's two live songs in the set. I think you're starting to see the different voice and kind of voicings Keith's going to use. It starts to change a little bit. I think his voice starts to drop a bit in register. It's not totally formed here yet, but it definitely gets smokier and a little bit deeper, I think, when you start getting into Dirty Work and then beyond. And then by the time he's done his solo tour, he's talked about, well, I had to learn how to sing the whole show.
Right.
Which is not something, you'd done before. But his voicings and things are different on this than, say, Before They Make Me Run from a couple years earlier, or
yes,
some of the things from like the mid-70s, like his, solo things you can hear, or things with Ronnie Wood.
This time it's not for fun. Yeah, you're the only one. What should I say to you? I only know that this life's all to do.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Hard Labor and Money Splashes, the podcast dedicated to the world's greatest rock and roll band, the Rolling Stones. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Email us at hardlabormoneysplashes@gmail.com.